Kasi nung teenager din ako, I feel like it was so hard to find adults who want to connect without being judgmental or without giving me a sermon. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to share very personal revelations that I've had while reading the books that will be discussed in this podcast. But this is not to impose that my take is exactly what the book is about or what the author is actually trying to say. How God will reveal himself to you will also be very personal. These are just how the books resonated in a particular time of my life. I hope that we learn more about God's character and how he loves to intervene in our daily ordinary lives. So let's begin this new episode. Let's find out the truth within the famous classic novel by J.D. Salinger called The Catcher in the Rye. So Holden is 16 or 17 years old and he has been kicked out of school again and again and again. He is quite problematic, very critical of people. He is quite sarcastic and actually nakakatawa siya. He is one of those characters that you would want to meet in person. But also this is the reason why many readers also dislike Holden. It's like he's stuck in a sick cycle, in a sick loop of trying and failing. Trying and then failing again, mag-e-enroll siya and then hindi niya matatapos. He's been in 3 schools already, na-expel siya. So either ma-expel siya or hindi niya tatapusin. He hates everything and everyone, almost everyone, except for his sister Phoebe. Holden is holding on to a lot of internal struggles and anguish that you're gonna feel sorry for him. At least that's what I felt. One of the highlights though is his resentment towards adults. So 17 siya, right? So he's coming of age, but he calls the adults around him phonies, which means pretentious or fake. And Holden believes that children are more genuine than adults. So he tries to hold on to his youth as much as he can because he hates the quote unquote phoniness of older people, which actually quite understand. Kasi nung teenager din ako, I feel like it was so hard to find adults who want to connect without being judgmental or without giving me a sermon. Or adults who are willing to be vulnerable and to show me and to tell me that they also lived imperfect lives as teenagers. They seem very anxious na baka mapariwara yung buhay ng mga mas bata sa kanila if they don't give advice right away. But now that I am already the adult, like I get it. I get it now. I understand now why it's so easy to be anxious. Especially if you're a parent. Parang ayaw mo nang i-open up yung mga mistakes mo in the past because you're worried na they might do what you did thinking na it's okay. And you wanna correct them right away because you feel like baka pag hindi ko siya kinorek ngayon, hindi na siya magbago or maging masamang tao siya in the future. Ganun. So I understand where Holden is coming from because I have been, of course, a teenager once, right? But right now that I'm already a mom, I'm already a parent, gets ko na din where the parents are coming from. But let's go to the title because this is where the juice of this episode lies. The Catcher in the Rye is based from a song called Coming Through the Rye. So, if you're like me na hindi rin alam ang ibig sabihin ng rye, rye is a type of grain. So, the imagery here is a field. It's a vast field of rye and then as you exit that field, there is a cliff na pwede kang mahulog. So, the catcher in the rye is actually a man on the field preventing children from falling off that cliff. And Holden, our main character, dreams of becoming that catcher in the rye. So Holden wants to be some kind of a rescuer, diba? Some kind of a superhero. He will stop the kids before they fall off the cliff. And the way I understand the fall is when kids make poor decisions as they begin to enter adolescence. You know, not simply entering adulthood, but also facing all the realities that come with it. When kids grow up, let's be honest, they will do embarrassing things, mostly out of curiosity, sometimes out of rebellion. They will be confused. They will feel lost. Kaya Holden wants to be the catcher. And every adult who has a young person in his life, anak mo man yan, kapatid, pamangkin, or we all turn into Holden at some point, di ba? We strive to be the savior of people. We think it is ours to carry. And what happens is we become anxious. And we are anxious because we want to control things. We want to control how they live their lives. And so we find it hard to make space for our children's mistakes and imperfections and their curiosities. But here's what God spoke to me in the middle of the night while I was writing a poem about Holden. And this might be weird to some of you, okay? But I imagine him saying it very casually because that's how I heard it. Like, I could imagine him in front of me eating popcorn and saying, "Hey, you know what? Jesus is the catcher in the rye." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" You know what? That same week, I was also reminded by the story of Samson in the book of Judges from the Old Testament. You're probably familiar with the story of Samson and Delilah. But when I read Judges that week, hindi ko alam na promised child pala si Samson. So it was a time when Israel was ruled by Philistines and they were oppressed in their own land. Now, there's this man named Manoah and his wife was barren. So they cannot bear a child. But the angel of God came to them saying na they will have a child. And this child, this son of them will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines. So kung ikaw syempre yung magulang, 'di ba? Kung ikaw si Manoah o kaya yung asawa niya, ang taas malamang ng expectation mo sa anak mo kasi nga si Lord yung nagsabi na may promise para sa kanya. Now, when Samson was past his teenage years, he got attracted to a Philistine woman. Sabi niya sa parents niya, "Get her for me. I want to marry her." Nakita niya, nagandahan siya, na-attract siya. So, syempre yung mag-asawa, yung magulang niya, parang, seryoso ka ba? Wala ka bang mahanap na ibang babae sa tribe natin? Bakit naman sa Philistine pa? Kasi nga, like what's happening at that time was the total opposite of what God has promised about Samson. It's like he's starting an ally with the enemy because he fell in love with a Philistine woman. And if you read through Judges 14, you could say that Samson's parents were like Holden and they were quite anxious about what's happening in Samson's life. And they objected. So sabi nila, go look for another woman, go look for another wife. They were anxious and I'm sure that they wanted to control the situation. But still in chapter 14 verse 3, it says, "But Samson told his father, 'Get her for me. She looks good to me.' His father and mother didn't realize the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over Israel at that time." And that was mind blowing to me. You could look at your current reality or the current reality of your kids, and it may seem like we are losing the battle without us knowing that God is at work, that He remains sovereign in the lives of our children, even if it seems like they are doing bad decisions or they're doing it wrong. So I pray that God gives us the grace to trust Him when it's really our natural response to panic, especially when it's about our children. Because as parents, we want to spare our kids from pain, right? But we also know that it's not always the way of things. And God works in ways that sometimes just don't make sense to us. But we can trust the God of the universe who loves our children way, way, way more than we do love our children. So to wrap it all up, I just want to say that I love the ending of The Catcher in the Rye. So Holden and his sister Phoebe, they were at Central Park and Phoebe was riding on a carousel and Holden was sitting on a bench, just looking at his sister, enjoying the ride. I just learned na yung mga sinuunang carousel pala, merong golden ring sa side na itatry nilang abutin at kunin habang iniikot sila. So there's a chance that they might fall from trying to reach that golden ring. And it was really quite symbolic. And Holden was just there. And here's what he says: "The thing with kids is, if they want to grab for the gold ring, you have to let them do it and not say anything. If they fall off, they fall off." It's like he's accepting finally the truth that kids will fall and that he cannot always catch them. And I think that that is the perfect ending for a quite imperfect story, yet a memorable and important one. So, what we can do is continue to guide our kids, but not with an anxious heart, but being fully convinced that what God had promised and what He has started, He is also able to perform and complete in their lives. And when we hold on to that truth na walang makakapigil sa plano ng Lord sa buhay ng isang tao, we become less judgmental of other people's mistakes and less controlling. So, yeah, we continue to pray for our kids, of course, because we are not with them 100% of the time. But God is present wherever they go, and He is limitless. I know that the enemy will always be in their eye, but we know that Jesus is also there to protect them and to catch them. And so I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Join us on the next episode of Truth in Fiction. But before I leave, here's the poem I wrote about Holden Caulfield: The Curious Kid, the Cynic Man. There are not many villains in the world, only broken people. Those who had a bad start, those who went on a free fall. The thing with kids, he wrote, is you have to let them do it without saying a word. Each is allowed to be at fault. If they fall off, they fall off. For days on end, he dreamed of becoming the catcher in the rye. But is it such a dreadful thing to let one's feet slide? The little girl rode a carousel. I'll just watch from here, he said. As she went around, the rain fell down, and while drenched in rain, he finally found someone will catch her if she falls free. And that man isn't me.